me, Andrew. I'm here at Star Cottage Studio. And yeah, let me know if you can hear me or not, because I'm trying to do something a little bit different with the earbuds, and I don't know if you all are able to hear me or not. So if you can hear me okay, let me know. And yeah. I thought I would try something different, which is probably not the best thing, but I thought it might be nice to be able to, so if you can hear me okay. All right, so Julie says, hi, hey Julie, and she says, I hear you just fine. Well, good. Hopefully, one of the reasons why I switched to the earpods is that we're going to be doing a little bit of hammering in this demo, and so I think that this, in theory, will make it so you don't hear as much of the ambient hammering. Kaylee says, I can hear you. Oh, good. Marianne says, can hear you just fine. Great. Jermaine says, hear you fine. Good. Julie says the studio is looking good. It's getting there. It's actually a little bit of a mess today, but I've been in meetings all day today. So, and I have another meeting where I've got to hustle a little bit, which is, that's good because I have a tendency to talk a lot anyway. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to put my glasses on, my safety glasses. We're going to be making this copper cuff, this twisted copper cuff bracelet. Somebody asked about making one of my bangles in the last video, and I was a little bit hesitant to do it because a friend makes these, but I don't think she makes them quite like how I do. So this is a little alternative on how to make these twisted copper cuff bracelets. So hopefully you all will like that. And yeah, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my apron. And there you go. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around and we will get started. Hopefully you all are having a good start to your week. It's been a kind of a little bit of a hectic week in a nice way, kind of. We're getting things all settled out. I do have some good news. I don't know if I'm allowed to share it yet. So if you are friends with me on my personal timeline, I'll share it there. But it's pretty cool. So I think that's exciting. All right, so I'm going to flip this around. Apparently it takes me longer to get everything kind of settled. So I'm gonna just do it. All right, settings, camera, back camera. All right, exit out of this. All right, so let's come over here. I'm gonna angle this down a little bit. And I've got some solid copper wire. I just picked this up at the hardware store. Let me put a banner. So I got this at the hardware store. It's 8-gauge copper wire. It's raw copper wire and it's bare copper. It's really important that if you plan on doing this, that you use bare or raw copper. If you use anything with a coating, it will burn off and be less than delightful. So it's super important that you use bare copper solid wire. In theory, you could probably do this with the copper tubing. However, I haven't done that, so I can't vouch for that, but it might be a little bit easier if you have mobility issues, especially if the walls of the copper are thinner. But you will have to experiment with that because I haven't done that yet. All right. So if you're just tuning in, we're going to be making this twisted copper cuff bangle. Now, a cuff is when there's a hole and then it slips on like that. So that's a cuff. And then like a bangle is usually a thin, complete circle, but since there's a break in it, that makes it a cuff. But it's not like a cuff where people have a wider piece of metal. So I think these are really fun for stacking. I love this texture. This is actually a forging technique. So if you do like blacksmithing and stuff, this is something that you will be familiar with, but it's a process of twisting the wire. And I think it's pretty cool. So hopefully you all think it's pretty cool also. All right. So what we're going to need, oh, and this, if you didn't see last week's video, this is what we made last week. We made this little copper bowl. I started it in the video and did a whole little run through of how to get started. And then I finished it up off camera. And I love this little bowl. And when I have a little bit of free time, I'm going to make a whole bunch of them. So I already have the copper already annealed. So I'm ready to go, kind of. So anyways, we're making this today. And I think these are really fun. You can do a lot of different things to customize these if you want it to be a little bit more razzle dazzle. I like copper, but sometimes copper will leave people's skin green, which I think is fine. You know, just wash your hands. It comes right off. It's not a super problem. If it is, you can always do things to jazz this up by using a little bit of the vintage patina paints. Yeah, that's one option. You could also use nail polish. There's all kinds of different things that you can use to add color to this piece. You could even enamel this. However, I wouldn't recommend enameling this. And the reason why is that when you take this on and off, there's a little bit of flex. And that little bit of flex will cause your enamel to crack off. So if you do any kind of enameling, do a soft kind of enamel technique. You can paint it with Tester's paints, which is a soft enamel that they use for models. So there's an option. All right, so for this project, we're going to need the 8-gauge copper wire. We're going to need something to measure the copper wire. And we're going to need something to cut the copper wire. Now, if you have bolt cutters, you can use bolt cutters. If you don't have a something that is heavy duty enough to cut the wire, you can always saw this out. And sawing will actually give you a much cleaner cut that is straight across. So if you're going to do any kind of like soldering and you want to control that, you can always use the saw to cut things out, and it's usually fairly smooth when you cut it. However, if you don't like sawing, you can always cut this off with the clippers and then file this completely flat if that's your jam. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is measure out our copper. And what we'll need to do is know how big to put it around the wrist. So there's a couple different techniques that you can use. I always have some kind of cording. This is a project that I was working on. And it's basically braided silk, like William showed you in the video last night. There was some silk and I just braided it. And then I did what's called a wandering needle technique, where you just go in and out and sew on seed beads, and it gives this fun kind of textured look, almost like spines. So if you are interested in any of the silk that we have on offer, William added a bunch of silk to the online store. That's allegorygallery.com. And I encourage you to take a gander and find some treasures to call your very own, because we've uploaded a ton of stuff and I've got a ton more to add. So yeah. Anyway, so take something that's flexible. If you don't have this, you can use a string, a piece of yarn, whatever, just as long as it's flexible. Also, figure out where your end is. I like to go by a little bit in. There's a knot here, and so I like to use that as my official end and beginning. So if you're going to measure this around, take your wrists and go around with the cord until you reach the end. So you've got, this is your length. So from this knot over to this point. So I'm going to measure this, and this measures to about 7 inches around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deduct 1.5 inches off of my total. So if you deduct 1 inch from 7, that's 6 inches. So we're going to need 5.5, or let's just deduct 1 inch from our piece, because I'm going to ball up the wire. So we're going to lose a little bit through that. So deduct 1 inch from the circle around your wrist. So that's 6 inches that we're going to need. All right. So this wire is already kind of stiff, so keep that in mind. So when you measure this out, you kind of have to manipulate it so that it's kind of straight, so that the ruler can go. And then you measure that out. I don't know if you can see this. I can barely see it. And if you need to, you can always mark it with a pen. I like to use Identi pens because I feel like they are the most long lasting. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to go back over and do a lot of refining. All right. So that shot out. I don't mind, but if you're in a group setting, make sure you're not facing anybody, because it's less than delightful to have that shoot at you. But for me, I'm in my studio by myself, so I have my piece of 8-gauge copper wire. Again, this is raw or bare copper wire. You don't want to use a craft wire or anything that's coated, because that coating will burn off. And generally, when you burn that kind of stuff off, it is less than desirable for your health. All right, so here's your piece. If you want an easier kind of a cheat to what we're going to do today, if you get square wire, then you can skip a whole bunch of steps. But this is round wire. So I have round wire, so I'm going to use what I have. But if you have square wire, you can skip a bunch of steps. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to move you over to the torch setup. And one way, if you're worried about this being straight, you can take 2 bench blocks and roll them back and forth, and that will roll out any kind of curvature, which I can show you how to do that real fast. So This wire is already kind of, it's already a little bit work hardened. So you just have to be mindful of that. So I have this steel bench block. I'll angle that down a little bit so you can see it. And then in theory, I have another block somewhere. Well, I can't find it. So we'll just have to use this and hope it still works. So you roll this back and forth. In theory, it's a little bit easier to roll this, but you know, that didn't work that great for that. Oh well. So in theory, you roll this back and forth, and it might be because this has a coating on it, but you roll this back and forth, and if it's softer, I think, because it's kind of work hardened already, pre-work hardened, so it's pretty stiff already. So if you got this nice and dead soft by annealing it, you could probably do it. But just kind of imagine that I'm rolling this back and forth, and this is rolling, 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 back and forth like this, and the wire's spinning, and that will roll out any of the kinks in your wire in case you need to straighten this piece of wire. All right, so let me angle that up a little bit. Somebody said cool shoes, thanks. I like gold. All right, so let me see. You can kind of see this situation. So note about safety, which I always talk about, make sure you have your fire extinguisher. Make sure that if you have any long hair to tie up your hair, if you have any dangling jewelry, take it off or tuck it in somewhere so that you aren't going to catch on anything. Also, make sure to wear something like an apron. This is like a little bit of an unwieldy piece. It's not too bad, but it will flop around a little bit. So I always say better safe than sorry. Make sure you have closed-toe shoes in case you drop anything. You don't want to drop hot metal on your bare feet. So as somebody pointed out, I've got my shoes on today. So make sure you wear some closed-toe shoes as well. And the other thing is if you are feeling your inner Stevie Nicks, and have some bell sleeves going, tuck that business in, roll them up, or put a scrunchie around them, or change your shirt, because you don't want anything that's going to dip into the fire and potentially cause a problem. The other thing that you're going to need is something that's going to hold your piece. I have this trivet, and the trivet has a screen on it, and the trivet screen is not perfectly even, so it's got some undulations to it. So that holds it pretty good. And then you also need something to hold your wire while you torch it. And so I've got these tweezers that have the little wood guards, and the little wood guards are really great because they prevent metal is a conductor of heat, and if you just use bare tweezers, no little wood pieces, there is a chance that your tweezers could get super hot and then you could burn yourself. So the goal always is never to burn yourself. Sometimes we do, you know, it's life, it happens. You get distracted, something might happen, it's fine, whatever. It is what it is. But if you can prevent that, then please, by all means, prevent harming yourself. So I like these ones with the little wood paddles on the side. That makes it super easy and convenient to pick things up and grab things. So that's what I'm going to use. Also, I have a fireproof surface underneath here, and that's super helpful because you don't want this, when we're balling the ends, we don't want this to fall down onto something that's flammable. So if it falls down, it will fall down into the pumice. So that's okay, because that's fine. But yeah, I don't want this to fall on the carpet and then have terrible problems having to put stuff out and replacing a bunch of stuff. So just skip that and make sure that you're on a fireproof surface. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can use a cookie sheet or something equivalent that is fireproof, and that will keep things fairly well contained. All right. Joanne says the little copper bowl is really pretty. A whole bunch of these would be awesome. Yeah, I just have to make them, right? So maybe in like 100 years, I'll have a bunch, but right now I have the one. All right, so we've got our metal prep, we've checked our safety. There's more safety that I could go into, but in the sake of time, I'm going to keep it fairly short. So this is the torch head. It's a bigger torch head. It's a size 2 torch head for the Smith torch, which is an acetylene oxygen torch. I've got my torch starter down here, which is super handy. It's an electric one. So you turn your gas on and you just lay it down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to anneal my piece of copper. So I'm going to go over it at just the tip of the blue flame. That cone, that tip of the blue cone inside the flame. That's the hottest part of the flame and is where the most heat is going to be. Some people think that it's closer to the tip, but it will actually make your flame sputter because it's blocking the flow of the oxygen. So just go back and forth until you get that nice kind of dull red color. But also the metal should look shiny. If the metal isn't, if it isn't annealed, it will be a dull color. But when you get that kind of shiny color, and you get that orange bounce back on this, then you know that it's annealed. And I'm just going to grab the end of this and put it into my quench pot. And then I'm going to flip this over since my bowl isn't that big and quench the other side. All right. So I'm just going to knock off some of the water there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ball the ends. So let me check and see. Cynthia says, I love the teeny tiny bowls. I want a bunch too. Well, we can make some. All right, so we're going to turn our torch back on. And when I do this, I notice I do this a little bit different. Most people, when they show how to do this, they go like this, and that's fine. But I always kind of start like this. I don't know if you're able to see this or not. And especially with like heavy gauge wire, if you come at it like so, and then bring the heat up and down, up and down, up and down. And you've got it like so. you're going to begin to ball the copper. And as you can see, I dropped a little piece of that off. So I'm going to go back and heat that up again. I'm going to let it cool a little bit and then quench it. Now you may have noticed that this got a little bit hot, this third arm. That's completely fine. This is non-flammable. But when I'm kind of demoing, it's hard to see where, you know, what's in the frame and what's not. So just be mindful of what's behind your setup. In the back, you may notice that you can hear a fan going. I've got a small charcoal filter fan that I'm using, and that's just to take out the bare essentials out of the air from the soldering fumes. Eventually, if we make enough money, I'm going to get a bigger extraction fan, but we're gonna have to wait and save up for that because it's a little bit pricey, and like Contemporary Craft has a huge ventilation system, and it's like $15,000 probably that they spent. We don't have that kind of budget, so we're looking probably around $300 or $400 by the time we hire the electrician and all that. Anyway, so I've made a ball on one end. It's not the biggest ball, but this is nice because then I don't have to round off the ends. It gets pre-rounded off as it balls up. So I'm going to do that again on the other side. See how that's splattered? So it's good to have, it's good to work on a surface that is non-flammable. All right. And you want to make sure that you cool both ends and not what I did and just reach in. But it was cool enough, but it was still a little bit hot. So use your tongs. If you use your tongs, then you're not going to burn yourself. So make sure not to burn yourself. And you can always test it to make sure it's not hot. So here we've got this. If you wanted at this point to turn this into a cuff bangle, you could easily do that. But we're going to add a twist to it. So to add the twist, the first thing we do is we dry it off because we don't want any kind of water to come in contact with the steel, my steel anvil. If you don't have an anvil, you can use a bench block. I'm going to use an anvil today because I feel like it gives you the best bang for your buck, literally. So that's what I'm going to use. So just dry this off. Some people, they pickle in between every time. I don't think that's necessarily not necessary. We will pickle it at some point, but what I'm going to do now, I've just got it where I've bowled the ends of this 8-gauge wire. So it's smooth. It's got a little end to it right there, if you can see that. And it's nice and smooth. All right. Cindy asked, did I share my good news? No, I didn't. I'm going to share that later. I don't know. I was in a meeting right before this, so I don't know if I'm allowed to or not, since I haven't had a chance to check my email. But yeah, so I've got this ready. So I'm going to take this over to my anvil. And let me get this so that you can actually see. All right, so I've got this, and one of the things I want to do is I want to measure my piece again and see that it's a 5 3/4. So we want to find the middle of the piece. So right there. All right, so find the middle of your piece and then work outward from where you are. Now I've got a couple different hammers. This is one of the Brenda Schwader hammers. And we'll use this a little bit, but I've also got, this is called a Planishing Hammer. The Planishing Hammer is to smooth the texture. This is a rounded edge planishing base. So this one is nice because it doesn't leave, it won't leave a mark. It will leave a hammer, like a hammer blow, but it won't leave like this. If you catch it on the edge, sometimes it can be a problem. Not necessarily this one because it's smooth, but sometimes if it's really sharp, like this one is really sharp, and that will leave a ding in your surface. So using the one with a rounded edge is helpful at this process. Now, there's a couple things to also consider is on a ball peen hammer, which we'll use this one as a demo. On a ball peen hammer, this side compresses and this side flares. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do one pass with a compression blow, and that's basically to straighten it out. And then we're going to go back over it with a ball peen side or a ball peen hammer to flare it out and make it a little bit wider. All right. So I'm going to get I'll use this one. All right. So you see where the middle is. And you work your way out. So I started in the middle and work my way out. I can flip it around. So when we hit it, it's actually growing the metal. So what we think is when we measured it last, it was 5 3/4, and now it's going to probably be a little smidgen longer. So I'm going to flip this over and do the other side. And you can see where I've hit it because it adds a little facet. And I'm going to get my rawhide mallet, this one, and just straighten it up a little bit. I don't want to work harden it too much because I want to keep this as flexible as possible, and it's already starting to stiffen up. But I'm gonna get my ball peen for this rounded faced hammer and start going from the center outward to help flare some of that metal out. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over and repeat. I'm not being too precise right now because I don't need to be. Ideally, your hammer blows will go like this and you'll move your metal. But sometimes I move my hammer. It just, you'll lose your precision. And sometimes that's when you get the dings in the metal. All right. So we flatten one side and we flatten the other side. Now, I can go back over this and I'll use this flat planishing. Maybe I'll use this one. I'll use this flat planishing and just smooth this out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. And already you can see it's a lot thicker, all right? So this side way thinner, this side a little bit thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner, thicker. All right, so at this point, it's super, super hard. It's work hardened. You're not going to be able to manipulate this anymore. So we have to go and anneal it again. All right. So I'm going to take this over to my torch station. And we're going to anneal this copper. So I'm just going to start at one end and work my way down. And I'm pushing the heat from one side to the other. And now that I've reached the end, I'm going to go back the other direction. And you can see it's starting to turn that red color. And the surface of the copper is starting to get shiny a little bit. That Sharpie marker that's in the middle disappeared. So we know that this is annealed. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure we quench our metal on both sides. So quenched on that side, flip it over and quench it again. And I'm going to do it again for good measure. And there you go. Now, once it's out of the quench, I'm going to dry it off. Like I said earlier, it's important that we dry our metal off because we don't want to put water on our anvil because it will make the anvil rust, and rust is the enemy of steel. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that the anvil lasts a nice long time. All right. So we've done a pass over the top and a pass over the bottom. And right now, these sides are a little bit curved. If you wanted to, you could leave it like this and start forming your cuff bangle if you wanted to. But if you want to add twists, we have to do another pass and make this into square wire, essentially, with 2 bald ends on either side. All right. Now, if you wanted to add any kind of texture or pattern, you could do that now. So let's do that. Let's do that. So I'm going to take this back over to my bench, or back over to my anvil. And I've got this laid down. Let's see. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm just got, this is called a center punch. And this is what you use when you're going to make a mark so that your bit, when your drill bit doesn't skitter around, it's just going to leave a nice smooth little hole. So this is how you start your hole, and you take a hammer and you hit it. I love this just for the textural fact that it leaves that little mark. So I'm just going to take this, and in the flat areas, every once in a while, I'm gonna hit it with lightly. Since this is annealed, it doesn't have to be super duper. You don't have to hit it super hard. If you wanted to use design stamps on this, you could definitely do that. Now, if you're wondering how I'm holding this, I'm holding it like this. So I'm bracing this. So it's 3 points of contact. The control up at the top, the control here, and then at the bottom, it's coming in contact with my surface. That way I have complete control over where this is. Now, if you wanted to be more precise, you could take a marker and mark out your dots. I don't think that's necessary. This is just a decorative. I mean, we're also going to do a lot of manipulation to this, so you might not even see this, but I think it's like the more you can add to it, I think the better, and in the ways that you kind of customize and make it unique and your own, and a little bit different. I think that's always good. So I'm going to flip this over and do this on the back side. And it's good practice for stamping. So if you need that extra practice for stamping, this will help you build up your stamping skills. The nice thing about doing this also is that it will help flatten the wire and spread it out a little bit. So in theory, if you wanted to, wherever there's a mark, a center punch mark, you can take a ball peen hammer and flare it out wherever there's a mark. All right. So let's do that a little bit. Well, we won't do it too much, but we'll take it and just wherever there's a mark, we'll just go around it and kind of confirm it. Somebody mentioned my anvil. It's a Peterite, and I believe it's like 90 pounds. This is my for my blacksmithing that I do. But I also use it for jewelry. So there you go. Now I'm trying to keep this as straight as possible, but it is what it is. It's already work hardened, so we have to anneal it again. All right. So I've got this piece, and I'm going to put this back, and we're going to anneal it real quick. Now, like I said earlier, there's a couple different factors that we're looking at to make sure that we know that it's properly annealed. One of the first steps they say is to make sure to look for a dull red color. That's not always accurate, so sometimes I will put a line of Sharpie, and once that Sharpie kind of burns off, then we know that that it's reached the annealing temperature. And also, you can put a little bit of flux, and when that turns glossy, then you'll know it's annealed. The other thing to look for is if you're heating this up like this, you'll see orange, and that will also be an indicator. You'll also see the kind of dull metal go a little bit shiny wherever you put the flame, and that's another indicator that it has been annealed. All right, so I'm going to be very careful to quench one side and then flip it over and quench the other. You know what? If you have a longer bowl or container, non-flammable container, you can do it all in one go, but I've got this round bowl and there's this long piece, so that's why I have to do it like this, because otherwise I can't get it all in the pot at the same time. So after we've quenched it, I've got to dry it off. And when we dry it off, like I said, we're removing the water so it doesn't rust the anvil. All right, so I'm going to walk this back over to the anvil. And I'm going to move my center punch off the anvil. And then I'm going to turn this on its side. And where it's rounded, I'm going to do and flatten it so that it's flat on all the sides. So that's the goal, is to have it be flat on all the sides. So I'm going to get this one. And that's the first pass. See, so we went and I just added that one line across the top. Now I'm going to turn this over on the other side and do the exact same thing. And because this is steel, their vibration is going to come up from the bottom too. So normally when I'm hitting it and it will just affect one surface. But since there's steel underneath, it's going to hit it from the underneath while I'm hitting it from the top. Okay, flipped it around, and I'm going to work it down from the center down to the other end. All right, so basically I made square wire. I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to change this. And use this other side. And I switched it to the sharp edge, and that left a bunch of nicks into this. So I'm going to switch back over to the smooth side and go over it again. All right, so you can kind of see it. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is switch to the rawhide mallet and just kind of gently correct it so that it's as straight as possible. Now, one thing you should be mindful of is that when you get a new rawhide mallet, they use a lot of glue in the rawhide mallet. So you have to condition your hammer. Normally, I don't recommend rolling around on the concrete. However, rolling around on the concrete is perfect to get the glue ready. So imagine this is a piece of concrete. You take this and you scrub it until it takes off that outer surface where the glue has kind of squeezed out, because that glue actually gets really hard and it will mark up your metal, and you don't want to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is take our piece back over, and we have to anneal it again. I know annealing is maybe not the most exciting thing. However, if you want your pieces to be workable, that's what you need to do. If you, generally speaking, a lot of issues people have with this kind of process, and actually a lot of metal working, is the metal is not always properly annealed. So people will struggle with using hard metals like copper. And if they struggle with those metals and it's really hard, usually all they have to do is anneal it, and that will solve a lot of the issues. So if there's ever any issues, that's one of the first things that I'll go to problem solve something, is to anneal the metal. All right, so we've heated our metal to the proper temperature, and now we are quenching it so that it's nice and cool and can be handled with our bare fingers. All right, and then we're gonna dry it off. All right. At this point, I'm not too worried about getting it super clean, because as you've seen, we're going to be annealing this again and again and again. So that's why I wasn't in a hurry to clean this, because it has built up a layer of fire scale, which is that black kind of oxidation on the surface. So yeah, so I'm going to take this, and we're going to take this and go over to a vise. So this is just a little mini vise that I've hooked up on the side of this table. And so what I'm going to do is, I don't want to smash my ball here at the end. So I'm going to open this up so I can fit it in there, and then kind of position it so that it's in the center of the clamp, but it's not going to compress the ball down too much. All right. Make sure it's in there tight, but not too tight, because this can mar up your metal. All right. So if you want, you can make these little jaw covers off of copper sheet metal, and that will help protect your copper as well. So I've got this locking wrench, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up about 1.5 inches and lock it in place, and then start twisting. All right. And then open it up, go up another 1.5 inches or so, And then I'm going to twist the other direction. Now, one of the things to notice is this isn't moving anymore as much after on this second pass. And the reason why is that when I twisted this the first time, I work hardened this. So this part was annealed still, so it wasn't work hardened. So that's the part that's the part of the metal that's going to move, and not the part that was previously work hardened. So I'm going to go up about 1.5 inches or so and go the other direction. Now I want to keep this as straight up and down as possible, because you get better curves that way. And really, the metal will let you know when it's done twisting. All right. And I went up a little bit and went in the opposite direction. All right. So that's how we get our twisted pattern in our bangle here. Isn't that fun? All right, so now you've got to use your fingers to kind of feel if there's anything sharp. Now, because this is sharp and these are sharp, so that does ding up the metal a little bit and make little sharp spots. So just take your sandpaper and make a little sandpaper taco and go in and sand down. Not too much, because we don't want to erase all of our hard work, but we do want any of those parts that's going to stick up and jab, right? We don't want to do that. And you can even, if your balls are a little bit shriveled up on the end, you can take the sandpaper and smooth those off as well. All right. So I've twisted it, and it's work hardened again. So before I can form this, I have to anneal it again. Let me check the time real quick. All right, so I only have 2 minutes left before I have to go to my other meeting. So I'm just going to describe what's going to happen next. All right, so after this is annealed and is dead soft again, I get a form like this. This is called a Bracelet Mandrel, and you can use a wooden one. It's actually preferable to use the wooden one, because if you use the wooden one, then you won't ruin your texture. Because the wood is fairly inexpensive, and if it gets chewed up by getting worked on, that's fine. That's not a problem. That's just what happens with the wooden mandrels. Sometimes people will be like, "Oh no, I'm marking up my wooden mandrel." That's not a problem, because you know, that's what it's designed to do. So once this is annealed again, you can do this on the steel or on wood, but you find the center mark, you measure this out, you find the center, you line this up, and then you bend it. I didn't have a chance to anneal this again, so it's still really hard. I could probably force it, but I don't necessarily want to force it, because if I force it, what's going to happen is that's when things can break. So I don't want to break them, because we spent all this time working on it already. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going, once you kind of bend that around, you just form it around, and you form it lower than you need it. So it'll make a bigger circle, and then you'll go up and you'll refine the shape. And sometimes there's a bracelet pliers, and they look like they look like these with the nylon jaws, and you can go through and form your wires like this and find the shape that way. So there's a couple different ways that you can do it, and you just keep doing this until you get that kind of nice oval shape with the opening. And then after you are finished forming it, you take your rawhide mallet and you put this over your piece and you work hard in it. And by doing that, you get a nice, work hardens it. And then place that in the pickle pot and then clean it up and polish it up, and you have a nice twisted open cuff bangle. All right, so there you go. Hope you all had fun. I have to run to the other meeting, so I will, let me see if I can figure this out. All right, I hope you all had fun today. I know that was quick, but we were mostly finished anyways. We just had one more piece to do to kind of shape it. But if you missed anything, you can always catch this on the replay. And that will be, I still can't figure out where the camera is on this. So you can watch it on the replay and have fun making these. And these are really great because you can embellish this a lot more. So if you wanted to, you could solder different things on top of this and really kind of customize it and make your own, add more texture, use bigger pieces. You can do multiple pieces and solder them together and then form them. So really, this is kind of a foundation to build off of, and you can really go wild and have fun. All right, so I've got to go to the other meeting, so I will talk to you all later. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Make sure to stop by the online store. That's allegorygallery.com. You know, if you like what you are seeing and you like this free tutorial kind of business, you can always help kind of grease the wheels and make it possible by adding a contribution by making a purchase in our online store. That's pretty much the only way that we can justify giving away free content. All right, so thanks so much. We appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.